Now, which question did you have?
Chapter 9, section 9.2, minus 8. I don't know what.
So you'll have different grades than me. Take your grades and average them. Add them all up and divide to find the mean. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So add them up and divide by 8. Then take the whole number larger than that. So once you know what the mean is, any number larger than that is going to make your average go up.
So if it's 80, then it would be 81?
Right, so my mean was 79.6, somewhere around there. So if my mean is 79.6, 80 and above will make my grade go up. Yep, what other questions do you have? We're looking at the section 10.5. Before we do that, I want to remind you that there is study group tonight. The last formal study group. If that doesn't work for you, then you can make an appointment with the tutors one-on-one at uwgb.edu/tutoring. Now, I believe you're only available through Friday, is that right? Only through Friday. So if you think you're going to need help Monday, that's going to be too late. Make an appointment Friday. Yes?
When is our quiz?
The quiz is whatever the registrar sets, and I believe it's Wednesday. Has anybody looked? Is it Wednesday at 8?
Yeah.
Wednesday at 8, so we have to be here earlier Wednesday. Any other questions? Then we're going on to section 10.5. We're checking out, can you always cut a cake up so that each person gets his or her favorite piece? So when you're dividing up a cake, there's the parts that have a lot of frosting or the parts that are just lots of cake. Does anybody else always want the biggest roses? I always like lots of frosting, unless the frosting's gross. Some frostings just aren't good. Well, we're looking at resource allocation, and we're doing it in forms of cake. But of course, this will apply to anywhere you're dividing up resources. For example, if you wanted to get an apartment with 2 friends, if it was a 2-bedroom apartment, so one of you is going to have to sleep on the couch, and in fact, one of the bedrooms is a master suite, you're going to have to decide how you're going to split that up. So we're going to talk about resource allocation today. We're using cake because choosing a convenient representation of a situation often allows us to see new possibilities. So that's the life lesson. And in fact, the cake is just a way to symbolize resources that have to be divided. So you can call 10.5 the greedy cake cutter's theorem. So we'll start with a cupcake, right? Work our way up to cake. Start with a cupcake. Did any of you ever have to divide a treat with a friend, or when you were little with one of your siblings? Probably that's better, because when you're dividing something with a sibling, you want to make sure you get what you want. With a friend, you might be more inclined to give them a little better. Did anybody have to cut up something when they were little? Okay. Well, how did you do that to make sure you both got a fair piece?
I will always make sure I get the bigger piece.
You always make sure you got the bigger piece. Okay. Well, that's nice if you can do it. Is there any way to make sure the other person feels like they're getting it fair and you feel like you're getting it fair as well? So you both feel that you have gotten a fair half. You don't walk away envying their slice of cake. Anybody have another way? A way that they would do this?
I have a question that's kind of random.
Oh, what's your random question?
For this quiz, we still need to have a note card, right?
You do get to have a note card for this quiz. Okay. So, who had to divide a piece of cake or some other treat with a cut in the middle? Split it in half. So you cut it in the middle. What if you're not sure? I mean, what if you just guess? Did anybody do the trick where one of you cuts but the other picks? So then, if you cut it and you felt like it was the middle and the other person didn't, they could get the part that they thought was the bigger half. So that's one way to do this. Has anybody ever done that? Yeah, that's how we did it growing up. One person cuts and the other picks first, because then the person cutting is going to make sure they cut it so they'd be happy with either piece, and the other picks first, so you know they get the piece they're happy with. We're going to move on to what do you do with 3 people. So we'll spend the whole day on what do you do with 3 people. So we'll make a bigger cake now, and we'll say there's a pretty flower arrangement on part of it. And then maybe another part has a plastic toy, which if you're 5, that's very important, right? Maybe part of it has a name, and you want that part that has your name. So the question is, what is the best point to divide up the cake? So that everybody feels that they are getting a piece that they're happy with, that they don't look at your piece and wish they had your piece instead. Well, we're going to place everything in a triangle because we're working with 3 people. The triangle will work best. So we're going to put our cake inside of a triangle. In fact, we'll be just dividing up triangles and thinking of them as whatever the resources that we need to divide up. We'll see that we can divide up anything we can put inside this triangle in a way that 3 people are happy with. So the question with the triangle is then the best place to divide this up. We're going to cut to the corners from a point. So the question is, where do you put the point? Do you put it right in the middle, like that? Or should the point be put somewhere else? And that's what we're discussing today. Where should you put this point that you divide from so that everybody's happy and doesn't look at the other person's portion and wish they had that? So we're going to have a north portion, an east portion, and a west portion. So where to put the point? That's how we're going to create either people who are satisfied or people who are dissatisfied. We're going to make what are called preference diagrams. So the preference diagrams are going to help us figure out where to put the point. The preference diagram to help us decide where to put the point. Because we'll just draw some smaller triangles here. You know, depending on what your resource looks like, maybe you're happy if you have a smaller east and west because there's something desirable in the east or in the west. Or maybe the point placed here would make you happy. Okay? Maybe you're just fine with a smaller north or west because there's something you really, a smaller north or east because there's something you really like there. Okay, so where do you want to place that point? Where would you be happy? So let's take a look at a triangle and think about maybe I don't really like up north in the triangle very much, but I would be happy getting the northern part if it was large. So maybe there's nothing real desirable up there except that it's big. So if that's the case, I would say that my point could be anywhere below this line because that would make that portion real big. And so even though I'm not fond of the north that much, if I drew a point down here below this line, then getting that huge amount of north would make up for not having something particularly desirable that I liked up there. So this would be this section that I drew right here, this line. This is a preference of what I would like the point to be placed, where I would be happy with the point being placed if I was getting the north section. So notice I'm not dividing the triangle up into portions. I'm saying where I would be happy with a point being placed if I'm going to get the north section. So if I'm going to get the north section, I want the point that we divide from to be down here, because then I'm going to get a big chunk of the north. On the other hand, maybe I don't mind if I get this much instead of a big portion of the east. So I have my north preference here, so I'm going to put N yet. It's kind of weird because we put north on the south, because what I'm showing is I want the north portion if we pick a point down here where I've labeled N. But maybe I don't mind if my portion over here is very big. So I'd be happy with the east portion with the point all the way over to here. So I'm going to draw a line here for my, to show that I'd be happy with the east over here with any point up to this line, because I really like something in particular in the east side of this triangle. And even if it's just a little bit, I'll like it because there's something I really like there. And then this gives me a east-west border. So my west, I'm saying I'd be happy with a point drawn over here to get the west piece. That's going to be pretty big then, and it'll make up for not getting that thing I like in the east that's really important to me. So let's go ahead and think about, this is called a preference diagram, where you put this boundaries where you would be happy with the different sections. So what I'm saying here is if we put a point on this section of the preference diagram to divide up the triangle, I'll be happy with the north. If the point we pick ends up being over here, I'll be happy with the east section. If the point we pick ends up being over here, I'll be happy with the west sections. So this preference diagram tells what section I prefer based on where that central point is drawn. where the dividing point is drawn or placed. The preference diagram tells what section I prefer based on where the dividing point is placed. So if the dividing point is placed over here, I want the west section. We're going to divide to the corners and I want the west section. If the dividing point is placed here, we're going to divide to the corners and I want the east section. If it's placed here, the point that we divide up with, then I want the north section. Let's go ahead and take a look at some preference diagrams and where I'm placing points. Okay, so we put the east, west, and north backwards because the preference diagram tells, let's just draw a kind of standard one, okay? Kind of standard preference diagram. So this north section tells that if I draw a point from here, from this section to divide up the triangle, I prefer the north. So let's actually divide that. Okay, so we're gonna, here's our dividing point. Now we've actually divided. So I used red to show that we actually divided. And we use this point, because, and this point means that since we picked that point to divide from, I prefer the north.
But if it was in the west and you divided with them, that means that you would prefer the west?
I'll do it again with one over there. Okay. So remember they're labeled backwards because this section is where I would prefer the west if the dividing point is put there. So if I place a point here, because remember you're going to be doing this not just with your preference diagram, but there'll be other preferences as well, 3 people's preference diagrams overlaid. So this says I prefer the west.
Okay, so wherever the dot is.
Wherever the dot is.
Okay.
So when you make up a preference diagram, you have to be thinking about how far over this line should go. How happy will I be? Will I be happy with a smaller east? Then you can put the line over here more. Will I be happy with a smaller west? Then you can put the line over here more, because then the point placement might give you a smaller east or a smaller west. Here, I'll give you another one. We'll put a very similar preference diagram again. This time, I put the point right here to divide with. So a similar preference diagram, but we're dividing from a point right on the border. So as you make a preference diagram, you have to be real careful where you place your borders, because now what does that mean?
You have no preference?
I'm okay with east or west.
What if it was on where the line intersects with the vertical line intersects with the horizontal line?
Yeah, so if you put it here, then you'd be okay with all 3 options. Okay, so make sure you're careful where you put that intersecting line, because you're going to have to decide what are you okay with. Okay, so let's put some preference diagrams that are overlays of 3 people's preference diagrams. So this is something online students you should print off and work on it with us, okay? It's on the Canvas homepage at the very bottom. Let me hand these out. Now, if you've been kind of thinking about Wiley or something, then tune in, because you're going to need to be doing this with class activity with other people. So you're going to need to know what's going on. So these are 3 preference diagrams overlaid. Well, there's 4 preference diagrams, but there's 3 overlays in each triangle. So we have Dash, we have Dottie, and we have Lionel. Okay, all their preference diagrams put together. All their preference diagrams put together so that we can find a choice that satisfies all 3 people. So the preference diagrams aren't the division, right? The preference diagrams are what people prefer. So for example, if we put a point here to divide, well, everybody would like north in this section. Lionel, this is in Lionel's northern section, Dottie's and Dash's. So we better not put the point here. It turns out there's lots of places you can divide once you have these overlaid. The places that work best are where 2 are crossing. So we find 2 preference diagrams crossing, that's where you should pick a point. So let's put a point here where Dash and Dottie's preference diagrams cross, and then take a straight edge and divide up the triangle with a different color or a pencil, something so that you can see what's going on. So this is where we're going to divide up the triangle.
If it intersects at like 2 places, like it intersects with, like Lionel intersects with Dottie, but also intersects with Dash at like a point.
Yes,
like
indeed.
They all do that, but which one should we choose? Like if the same line intersects with 2.
So in real life, pick several examples and work it out and discuss it, okay? And on your quiz, this is very similar to a quiz question you'll see. On a quiz, you can pick any of the crossings. But in real life, yes, you would want to work it out and think about. Can you please pass that back? So we picked the intersection point. Now think about what each person wants at that point. Okay, so we look at Dash, Dottie, and Lionel and decide what they each wanted there, okay? So the intersecting point is on Dash's border between west and north. So Dash is saying, I'd be happy with the west border or with the north border. So I'm going to write that down. Dottie, the point we picked is on Dottie's border between east and west. So she said she'd be happy with either east or west here. This point, let's see, on Lionel, this point is on the west border, the west section. So it's right here, Lionel's western preference.
Wait, how do you know that?
So here's Lionel's line,
Yeah.
and here's west. So the point is in his west section.
But then how are
So this dotted line is Dottie's preference border between her east and west. So she's saying she'd be happy with either one if we draw the point there. And the point fell on Dash's border between his west choice and north. So he's saying he'd be happy with either one of those. So the preference diagram needs to be carefully thought out for this to work in real life. But once you've done it, then it sets what's going to happen now. Because Lionel gets his west border, okay, his west section, and that removes west from any of the choices for the other two. So Dash is going to get north, and Dottie's going to get east. So here's Dottie getting the east. Dash is getting the north, and Lionel gets the west. So the preference diagram says, where would you be happy if we put the dividing point? What sections would you be happy with? I'd be happy with the north section all the way up to here, if the dividing point's here. I'd be happy with the west section if the dividing point falls over here. And I'd be happy with the east section if the dividing point is drawn in the east section.
How Dottie is east and west.
So Dottie has this little dotted line right here. So that dotted line divides up the east preferences for her and her west preferences.
But then all of them do east and west.
They do, yeah. All of them do east and west. But you notice this dot was on Lionel's west, because here's his border, so it was on his west.
So like Dottie can't have west, and then Lionel also have west.
Correct. Dottie can't have west, and Lionel also have west.
Okay.
So once you've decided what each of the persons are good with, that's when you start saying, okay, that means you get this and you get that. So each person has to be very careful setting up their preference diagram so that they are in fact happy with the section that they get. We'll spend some more time on making the preference diagrams after we look at these examples. Did anybody start this one and want to pick where we're going to put the dividing point?
I just know where Lionel and Dash cross.
Where do you want to put it?
I did it where Lionel and Dash cross.
Right there? Okay, so we have someone starting on it right here. So that's where our dividing point's going to go. So take out your straight edge and divide up the triangle to each vertex from that point. Now we'll see where the point fell in everybody's preference diagram. So we'll write down their names. So the point we divided up the triangle from was right on Dash's dividing line between west and north. It was also on Lionel's dividing line, and that dividing line for him was also between west and north. Oops, yeah, that's Lionel. Thank you. For Dottie, this was a point right in her west section. Okay, so Dottie prefers west there.
Wait, how does that work?
Yeah, that's not going to work, is it? It's the first time I had one of these happen. Did I miss something? Let's see, west and north. West and north. So that's not going to, for sure, nobody wants the east there. So this is the first time I've had this happen. Let's pick a different point.
Interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know that could happen. That's very interesting. I imagine it's because it's the north, it's in everybody's west, and it's for the other two, it's on their northwest. Okay, so retry, reboot. Fortunately, there are other places where the lines are crossing, so we'll pick another spot. So if you have another color to work with, if you don't have white out, that would probably be good as well. I'll grab my green marker. Okay, so let's try a different one. How about this one? Did anybody else pick a different one already? We'll try this one. So where Dottie and Lionel are crossing. So we're dividing up scarce resources, and we're thinking about what will give everybody a section that they'll feel content with, that they've said, okay, I'd be good with this. So this time, our dividing point was in Dash's east. Okay, so we have Dash's east section. Dottie, this was on Dottie's dividing line between east and west, so she said she would be content with either there. For Lionel, this is on his section between east and north. So there must be something in the north that he's content with this small section, just so that he gets it, whatever is special up in the north. So since Dash doesn't have any other choices, we pick Dash first, and then we cross east off from the other two people, and that gives the three sections, each which the person said they would be happy with. So Dash gets the east, Dottie gets the west. Oops, you know, you start writing E on the left and you start thinking it's east. It's not. Okay. Dash gets the east, Dottie gets the west, Lionel gets the north.
The E and W are switched on the paper.
They are supposed to be switched on the paper. Yes, that's why it gets a little confusing. You have to actually work it through, I do anyway, and think about, okay, what am I doing when I do a preference diagram? When I do a preference diagram, I'm labeling it backwards because I'm thinking this is how far up I'd be happy with a point placement when we divide if I get north. This is how far over I'm happy with a point placement for me to get the west. This is how far over I'm happy to get the point placement if I get the east. Anyone want to pick one over here for us? Anybody start work? Yes.
I'd like to clear up why the first point didn't work for them.
Oh, did you work on it? Good.
It's because the intersecting line was on the same border.
Okay, so that's very good. So watch out for if you have a northwest and a northwest crossing. Don't use that. Or a northeast and a northeast crossing. Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Any other people want to choose a point here? Okay. Well, then I'll just pick this one randomly, all right? Okay, so I'll go ahead and divide it up. So it's where Dash and Lionel's have a crossing happening. And like I said, there's lots of these places, so I would in real life make several divisions and then decide which everybody liked the best. Can you please write down the preferences for Dottie, Dash, and Lionel at this division point? Who prefers what? See if you're getting the hang of this. So what did Dottie prefer here?
East?
Yeah, west, because of the W.
Wait, that's
So
Dash.
this is Dottie's.
Yeah.
So this is Dottie's west. So Dottie's diagram, if you could just ignore the other diagrams. Dottie's diagram goes here and here, and this section is west, and that point is west.
Oh, I see it now.
How about Dash? What is Dash happy with here? East or west, that's right. So it's right on his border between east and west. And Lionel,
Wait, how did you make that?
so here's Dash's dividing line,
Yeah.
and it's dividing the west from the east.
Oh, I was looking at mine on the way.
Oh, good. Okay, so what is Lionel like? Yeah, west or north. Okay, so it's on his horizontalish kind of line. So it's his north and west. So we give Dottie the west, and that crosses out west from these other two, and they're going to get east and north. So Dottie gets the west, Dash gets the east, and Lionel gets the north. So the way we get good at math is to practice. So we have one more, because I want you to be able to do this really well on your quiz. So let's pick a dividing point and see if you can label what everybody gets, what everyone prefers from that point, and what everyone gets. Did anybody start on this? Okay. How about this one? If anybody's stuck, raise your hand. So you should have had dash. That was on his east-west border, so he said he'd be equally happy with either. Dottie, that's in the west section, her west preference area for Dottie. For Lionel, it was right on his border between his east preferences and north preferences, so he said he'd be happy with east or north. Now when you actually go to pick, you had to do a little logic there, okay? You had to pick, give Dottie the west, because that's her only choice. That means you crossed off west from dashes. So Dash gets the east, and Lionel gets the north. So hopefully you picked all of those. So Dottie out here, Dash over here, and Lionel up here. So making these preference overlays and then picking out how to divide is a way to divide up resources. I think making the preference diagram is really important, though, especially if you get to be the one on the border where you're saying you're equally likely with either piece. Well, you really want to be equally happy with either piece if you pick that. So we're going to make some preference diagrams. Remember, they look like this. They're not the dividing up the triangle to the corners. They're saying where will you be happy if we divide it up. You'll be happy with the north if we go from here down. You'll be happy with east anywhere we divide over here. So if I like something a lot in the east, I don't mind shoving this line, this vertical line way over so that there's just a little slice of the east. If you want to, you're not that happy with the west unless you get a lot of it, then you need the line way over here so that you're going to get a lot of the west if you put the point in the west. So we're going to divide up the state of Wisconsin. So if you turn over your preference diagrams, this will show up. Oh, I do that every time. I printed them upside down. Can you work with it like that? Okay, we're okay. All right. So here you go. State of Wisconsin, divided it up. Online students, you can print this out from Canvas.
Is this in class?
We're going to do it today in class.
No, like, is it something with the
I do not make an activity. Now you're making a preference diagram. Don't divide this up. And I'll send markers around. You can use your own markers. This is for you to keep. So you can use your own markers even if they're permanent. But make sure you're content with where you're placing points if you're going to use permanent ones. I have a box of Sharpies and a box of Papermates, and they both worked well last time. But you can use your own markers too. So please just send those around so everybody has one. Use the Papermates if you're not sure you know where you want to put your preference diagram right away. So in your preference diagram, you're deciding what you want in Wisconsin, and we're going to overlay this with 2 other people, so there'll be 3 of you. So how can I have cat here? I'm just not even near my cat. Okay, there we go. So I, for example, really like the lake shore. So I'd be happy with a little bit of the west, even if the point's all the way up to here. So I'm going to put my east-west border over here. On the other hand, I would rather just have a big piece of western Wisconsin if I'm going to have western Wisconsin. My husband, on the other hand, would have this line all the way over here because he likes western Wisconsin. Remember, this is the west preference, this is the east preference, and this is the north preference. So I'm putting my east-west preference way over here because I would like the east anywhere up to here. And I'm not real big on cities, so I'd rather stay above the south.
South only.
Yeah, we don't really have a south. We have a north. I'm gonna put my line way down here and hope that I don't get much of the south. So go ahead and put your own preference diagram out, and then we'll overlay these and see if we can divide up the state of Wisconsin in groups of 3. So online students, you can print one out and share it with a couple of friends instead of using overheads. Okay, so you have yours done? Okay, you're pretty equitable, just want to stay away from that southern end.
No, I do want, oh wait,
All the sections
I
must
want
be even.
the south.
Do you want this out? No, they don't have to be even. They shouldn't be even, so there's probably a space that you like better.
So my line should be up.
So we're thinking about, yeah. Well, I think so. Let me think. So we're thinking about, okay, if I put a point here and divide the state, I'm saying this is where, if the point ends up here, I want the north section, which is in fact most of the state. So I don't think that's going to happen. If you like the south more, does that mean you should move it?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you like the south more, then move it way up here.
That's
And then you're saying I only want the north. Well, wait. You only want the north if you get this part.
I just don't want the north at all.
You don't want the north at all? Then put yours way up. Oh, you might get the north. Is there any way that you would like the north? You might get some of the north.
I like back home.
Madison? You like Madison? So it's kind of, in one way you're saying, well, I would take the north if I got this much of it. So let's see, you might, So we're saying if you divide from a point that's in your north preference, you would prefer north. If you divide in the point from your east preference, you'd prefer east. If you divide in the point from the west preference, you prefer west. So we'll walk around and help you with this, and then we'll put it together and divide it up. If you have yours done, find 2 people to group with. You might need to put yours with somebody's. Okay, so you have your preference diagram. Okay. So here you'd be happy with north. Okay. Here you'd be happy with west. Here you'd be happy with east. Okay. Then you can overlay yours. Okay. So here you're saying if we end up putting our dividing point here, you'd be happy with the west. If you put the dividing point here, you'd be happy with east.
Well, my hometown is better than Green.
What if you put the point here, would you be happy with north? Okay, that's what you're saying. Okay, so you need 2 to 3. Yeah, you have 3. Can you 3 do 3?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you 3 do 3? And you can work with the person behind you.
I'm not entirely sure.
So Nicholas, can you put yours with the 2 people there? Oh, wait, you already have 3? Oh, okay, sorry. If KJ comes back, you and I didn't have ours. Okay, so go ahead and stack them up and find a point. So you're saying if you divide here, you'd be happy with north?
I don't want.
So this is saying, oh yeah, put initials by your name on yours so that you can tell whose is who is by your little drawing. So here you're saying if we end up picking a point here, you'd be content if you got this much of the state. If you put a point here, would you be content if you got that much of the state? That's what that variable is. So any point, yes. If you have any questions, over.
My borders.
Nicholas, can you grab pages and mine and put it together? How did you stack up? You're still dividing the scenes? Okay, you have yours stacked up? You have them, you can pop them apart because you have guys stacking mine? Okay. So in real life, you'd take several different spots and compare. So Nicholas and KJ putting yours together and mine. So put initials on yours, KJ, so that you can tell yours. How did this end up for you? Which spot did you pick to divide? Which spot did you pick to divide?
Yeah. Right here.
Right there? Okay, then put a point there and draw the lines. Do you have a straight edge? Grab a straight edge and draw it. And then figure out who wanted what.
Oh, yeah, that's you.
You go here.
So you picked up point to divide, and you write it down. So
We have both had different colored markers.
Yeah. Let me just grab.
it is hard to tell.
This is my line, the very bottom.
So now you just pick a spot. So if you write on there, on the actual division, it's kind of fun to see what you get. Oh. Okay.
Get all the lines.
Nice one.
Hurry up. You got it. Oh, shit.
Fine, just go.
You're like, I want to do it over again now that I tried it. I think that's probably how you would do it.
For real?
I think in real life you'd do it over again once you understood what was going on. You're like, wait, I didn't understand. You probably have to have a practice run and then a final run. So here's one that got finished. So they picked a point where they're crossing, and then they see who decided what, and they were able to divide up the state into sections. Look like they may have gotten Madison in both. So when Friday we'll be reviewing, please print out the review sheets to bring to class Friday.
Because this is north, that's north.
Wait, so this is north? This is west?
That's what I'm like, that's part of the law confusion. Like, wait, that's not supposed to be right.